Out my future course of action, and that's essentially what I did. I had uncles who had served in the military, so I always had a great respect for the military anyway. Come along 1976, August 19th, I was watching television that night, and it was the night of the Republican National Convention. It was in Kansas City, and that night was the night that Gerald Ford was to be nominated to run for president. But everyone kept talking about this other gentleman who was in the arena by the name of Ronald Reagan. And I had not ever seen Ronald Reagan before, but that was all of the talk. The correspondents on the floor were debating whether he would accept a position as vice president, and they would not accept a vice presidential spot on the ticket. And I couldn't understand that. I was 12 years old at the time. Why wouldn't anybody want to be vice president of the United States? Who is this guy? And I watched and watched and watched, and the night went on, and I remember it was late that Chris will probably remember exactly what time that Reagan actually came down to speak, and he was very inspiring. And I was touched by his words, and I began to follow him. And later, a few years later, in 1980, when he ran for president, he talked about restoring honor and dignity to the military. He talked about cutting taxes and allowing hardworking people to keep more of what they earned. He talked about things like welfare reform, in that if people get government benefits, they ought to work for the benefits that they get for the government, at least for the fact that they are able to retain their sense of self-dignity and respect. Those principles meant something to me then, because they were essentially the same principles that people in my community impressed upon me. When he talked about restoring dignity and honor to the military, I thought he was talking about my Uncle Joe, who had served in Vietnam, who couldn't find a job. He had a difficult time finding health care when he came back from the war. Didn't have a lot of respect, get a lot of respect from his family or the community, and I thought it was a tragedy. And to see this man talk about restoring honor and respect to people who had served in the military and to the military itself meant something to me. And so I became sort of an instant fan of Ronald Reagan and followed him throughout his career. Well, in 1982, I went off to college at Hampton University, and I majored in political science, so we would very often have political discussions in class. Hampton University is a historically black college in Hampton, Virginia, founded in 1868. There weren't very many Republicans in my class. Come around October of 1983, the United States had invaded Grenada, and I was sitting in class, and by that time I was just fully into ROTC, Army ROTC. I was on an Army ROTC scholarship, which is how I got through college. And I noticed very early on that my professors didn't particularly care for the fact that I was in ROTC, which you never want to let on to a 18, 19-year-old, because they'll do things like I did, which is, well, I think I'll decide to wear my ROTC uniform every day. So here I am sitting in class in October of 83, and my professor's ranting about Reagan sending the 82nd Airborne into Grenada, and this is egregious, and so forth and so on. she wanted to know how the class felt about it. And, so I raised my hand. I was sitting in the back of the class. And I said, yeah, this is great. I had already been to airborne school, so I was already a paratrooper. I proudly wore my airborne wings around on my uniform. And, this is wonderful. I'm hoping that I'll get called up so I can go in, and so forth and so on. And then she was writing on the chalkboard when she asked the question. Then I noticed she just stopped. She turned around and she said, there's a word for people who believe in that kind of nonsense you believe in. And I said, what's that? She said, you're a Republican. Well, I've been called many things in my life, but that ain't one of them. I had never been called a Republican before, but to her credit, she said, I want you to come see me in my office after class. Well, I thought I was done in for. And so I stopped to see her at her office, and she gave me a couple of books to read about the origins of the Republican Party and so forth. And she said, if you're going to believe in this, you should learn more about the party that probably is more aligned with your philosophical orientation and what you believe in. And so I read them, and I don't know if she thought I would be dissuaded from my point of view, but I came back 2 weeks later. I'm like, do you have any more books I can get? Which was not exactly the response she was hoping to get, I could tell. I pretty soon figured, well, there's a strong likelihood I'm going to be black the rest of my life. Is this really what I want to do? And so I started really giving more thought to what the party stood for. And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense to me. I had seen through my own eyes the devastation, personal devastation, of mainly women in my neighborhoods who received government benefits and did not work. They didn't walk around with a great sense of self. Their children grew up in families where they didn't see their mother work and therefore didn't have a healthy appreciation for work. Whereas I had been raised in the same community, but my mother worked 2 jobs and sometimes 3 jobs to make ends meet. I've always felt that they made the difference. My mother worked the 11 to 7 shift as an LPN at the UVA hospital at North 1, Newborn Nursery. This is the old hospital. And she worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. She would come home, get us ready for school, send us off to school. I guess she'd take a nap after we left to go to school. And then after a few hours, she would get up and go cook at fraternity houses at UVA. And the gentlemen at these fraternity houses were extraordinary in their generosity. She would cook through the evening meal, and if there was food left over, which there often was, that would become our dinner for the night. So she would bring that home, the leftovers from the fraternity house, and that would be our meal for the day. And then on weekends she would have a third job. And so she worked a lot. And listening to Bernie tell the story,
The Albemarle Republicans meet for breakfast at 8:30 a.m. on the second Saturday of each month at the Golden Corral Steakhouse on Route 29 North next to the main post office. Join us for breakfast or visit us at www.albemarlegop.org. Give us a call at 434-973-5499 or send an email to info@albemarlegop.org.